Hi, welcome to Waylo's Workshop. I'm Waylo, and we are here in the shop today to finish our B9 robot project. As you can see, he's still on our Tamiya paint spraying stand, just where we left him, all in pieces. I did lose a bit of footage when my hard drive crashed 5 months ago, and that was the footage in which we inserted the clear tinted pieces into the body and base of the model. So I'm going to take you through now what you did not get to see in that footage. The way these pieces are made is there's small tabs that lay and rest right on the outside edges, so you insert them from inside and you just see the outside pieces. So what I did was where those tabs make contact with the inner part of the robot, using a toothpick, I just put a little bit of Instacure with a toothpick, dropped it right in there, and pretty much super glued it right in place. So that's pretty much how I handled that. It came out wonderfully. It fit real good, and I just let gravity hold it in place by holding it down. I did the same thing in his base. There's 4 pieces of red plastic here as well, as you can see, and those came out real nice. So that's the footage. That's the footage I lost when I was in the process of shooting when the hard drive crashed. So sorry for the 5-month delay for those of you who have been following along. But again, I just took a little bit of super glue, hit those tab points, just let gravity hold it in place, and pretty much from here on we're going to do that high-speed painting thing that I like to do, and we'll be back. So I'm using an old GW paint here. This is blood red. You can go over to the website and or go on Daka and look up the current game shop equivalent of that color. But what I'm trying to do here is just put down a nice even coat. I have the claws here left to do, the little paddles that come off the side of his head, like his little antenna there, and then the buttons on the chest plate of the robot. So what I'm looking to do here is just to get some bright colors working again against that silver and gray, so these components kind of stand out. So I'm picking the brightest colors I have and laying those down in some nice even coats. It does take, even though these are more or less foundation colors, that's foundation white there, that's their skull white, if you remember those days. I don't know what they're calling it now. But what I'm doing here is I'm putting white over the silver in order to get those colors to stand out a bit more. The oily steel tends to swallow color, so by painting these white, I'm trying to get the colors to pop a little bit more. Plus, I'm looking to give it a kind of an antique effect, because what I want the toy to look like is something that's been like sitting around since the 60s on my desktop. So I want the color to be there, but I don't want it to be so bright and vibrant that it looks brand new. A good example of that washout I was just talking about is the blue color you see me putting down on the palette right now. That blue, because of the steel, you can't see it at all. Blue is in steel. If you ever see anybody paint like a silver cup with oil paint and mix the metal color, you'll find the base of that is a blue. And when you put blue against silver, it just tends to disappear. Here I'm just painting all the little dots. Again, the entire figure is the size of a Vallejo model paint bottle, one of the 17 milliliter bottles. And that's completely assembled. So you can imagine just how small these buttons are on this panel in spite of how close I'm holding it. That's less than the size of a quarter. And again, I'm trying to put down those blue buttons. It's just not working. So I'm going to go back and use yellow and green and just kind of alternate those colors back and forth. I also painted one of the buttons down below red. I didn't like the way it looked when I finished it, so off camera I went back and just put one touch of green over it. So you'll see that the entire instrument panel down below, the more square buttons, are just yellow and green. Here I am painting out the blue now. And again, to get those colors to stand up, you got to kind of go back and forth with the colors back and forth. And that's basically what I'm doing, is I'm just trying to get those colors to stand up as much as possible. Because now what I'm going to do is come in with a black wash. That's Badab Black, old GW Badab Black. And I'm blacking it all out using the black wash. And now I'm going back and putting the buttons back in. And the effect I'm looking for is, like I said, is more or less an antique-y looking toy. Or maybe like an old wind-up robot model. And again, I'm just replacing just repainting the colors back in. I want them to stand out, but I don't want them to stand out so much that they overpower the model. So by hitting it with that black wash, I brought the tone of the colors down, and it also gave them an aged effect, which is, again, what I'm looking for. Now here what I've got is a gloss clear coat, and now I'm going over everything that I just did with that gloss clear. And the reason I'm doing that is, one, to because of the metal again, it tends to swallow color, and so what I'm doing is I'm giving it a gloss effect, so it catches more of the light when you look at it, and it makes those colors pop a little more and stand out a little more, while without it being overpowering. And here we're going to begin the assembly work. Using Tamiya Ultra Thin here for all the places where I'm doing plastic on plastic. In the back you can see the Instacure, and that's for the places where I've got painted plastic. And of course the difference being is normally when you paint, you don't want to put paint where you're going to be gluing. But occasionally it does happen, or you're not exactly sure where your seam lines are going to be. So using the super glue in its place, it works just as well. And here, I don't know if you can see it, I'm trying to show you on camera, is this that they're not just pins, but they're like little block pinholes. So I mean, they did a real good, nice job of the way they formed this to put it together. Everything fits just really nice. It went together real easy. And here I've got the painted area of the base of the model. Rather than filing it down or sanding it down, I'm just using a little bit of the Instacure. The bad part about using super glue is, of course, is the spider webbing effects. You get all the streamers going. It gets kind of annoying. It reminds me of the old tube glue from when I was a kid. That was one of the things I always hated about building models with it. That's why I just love that Tamiya Ultra Thin. That stuff is phenomenal. But here I get it in place, I get rid of all the spider webs, and we're good to go. Okay, now for the chest piece, I'm going to do exactly what we just talked about. Using a sanding stick, I'm just going to clean the paint off that edge. That edge is not going to be exposed. I'm pulling away to the inside of the model, I guess is the way you put it. In order to keep it from chipping on the edge. So if you pull back rather than push forward, more like you're pulling it into the inside of the model, it'll keep that edge from chipping. And again, I'm just giving everything a good coat of Tamiya Ultra Thin. Once I've got it together, I'm going to go around the outside again with it, just because where I cleaned up, the capillary action will get down in there and fill that gap and hold it together real nicely. And again, we've put the model together. We've put the top to the bottom there, and now we're going to put the dome on. We're going to start putting the head assembly together, I guess, for the leg. And what I'm using is crystal clear. I really like this stuff. It really works well. It goes on, it looks like almost like Elmer's glue. But when it dries completely clear. And at first, when I put it down and I saw how white it was, I couldn't believe how clear it would actually get. And I kind of panicked, so you'll see me scrambling a couple times here trying to get rid of the excess glue. Here I'm just trying to get a good snug fit. There are tabs in the model that show you, so you can figure out pretty much how the pieces go together. Again, I'm going to put glue on the surface here, and then I'll go around the inner ring there just to make a good solid bond. Now this doesn't cure instantly, so you do have to give it some time to dry. but when it does dry, like I said, it dries completely invisible. So that's really a nice factor about this glue. I got the idea for that from the guys that build model aircraft. This is the canopy glue they use, so I figured putting these clear pieces together, since I haven't done that in about I don't know, 35-40 years, I didn't know what products to use. What I didn't like about the model, I wasn't real happy with, was the way the rest of the neck and head assembly go together. It seemed really weak to me, so what I do here is I'm going to drill this out and put a paper clip through it. So pretty much like a shish kebab, I'm just going to drill holes through everything, put a piece of paper clip through it, use the Instacure to glue the plastic parts to the metal, and then as I stack them, I'll use the Tamiya Ultra Thin to glue them all together. So that's what you see me doing here. I'm just pretty much shish kebabbing everything together, stacking one on top of another on top of another. Now this is another element, this is the part I was talking about where I go through and panic. I put down all this clear and then put the top of the dome lid on, and then I see this big white line going around the outside edge, and I start panicking and I start rubbing it all off. First I try to just wipe it away with a toothpick, then I'm using my finger, then I'm licking my finger, just anything to get as much of that glue off as I can get. In reality, what happens is when that glue dries, I do have a seam line there, which is a natural seam line because you can never make it completely invisible. But you don't see the glue at all. It's completely transparent. And now here, what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm drilling out the neck. There's a little tab hole for where the plastic pieces are supposed to fit. I just shaved all the tabs off. I drilled holes through everything, put the paper clip in, and now what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm starting out with a pilot hole, and I'm making that hole larger till the point that it gets to the size of the paper clip, because I don't want anything to crack or break or anything like that. So I'm just being a little more careful about it. Once I get it all the way through and I've got it to a large enough size, I turn around and test fit it, and then we'll glue it up. It looks like it dried pretty well, looking pretty solid. We put that together, nice test fit. He looks excellent. And now we'll just separate them, get a little of the Tamiya Ultra Thin out, and go ahead and glue plastic on plastic there. Now again, I glued the plastic pieces to the metal using Instacure, and then I'm gluing plastic to plastic with the Tamiya Ultra Thin. And there you go. He's pretty well done. So now let's take a look at what we used to build him with. Okay, so let's have a look at that model. And there he is completed. Just like I said, the clear did come out completely clear. That's a wonderful product. Microset and Microsol come from Microscale Industries, and that's where I got crystal clear. You can pick this up at your local hobby shop or order it online. But this is really good for the clear components here, as you can see. While I do have a seam line, you're not seeing any white glue, and there's that blue array inside. But anyway, I think he came out really nice. He does look like a little bit of an antique toy sitting there, which is what I wanted. I want to keep him over here on the side of my workbench and just have him staring at me. Also, the Tamiya paint stand, again, I did a video on that. If you guys want to take a look at that, I'll put the link down below for it. But yeah, really worthwhile having. Really useful product. I use it all the time. I'm constantly clipping things into it. Okay, so let's go through what we used here exactly. The paints I used were kind of a mishmash here. For the rubber components on his body, I used Panzer Ace's dark rubber and Panzer Ace's light rubber. So that's how I got that kind of coloring. I also, for a darker tone, I used Vallejo Model Color Black Gray. So there's all your, let's make sure we get all those numbers on camera. I know I watch videos and I look at what they do and I wish they would show me, please tell me what kind of paint you used and please tell me what kind of brushes you use. So that's why I try to do these things. I mean, if you guys don't want to watch, that's fine. But I know when I was starting out, I was always, what kind of paintbrushes are you using? What kind of airbrushes are you using? So at the end of each one of my projects, I intend on doing this kind of roundup of what supplies and materials I used and, what brands I used. So along with that, now I've got natural steel here, which is one model color. And then I've got oily steel here, which is another model color from Vallejo. And then I've got Vallejo Model Air Chrome, and there's your number on that. Now what I did with that was on the bottom half of the robot, I used the natural steel as a foundation, and then I just made touches in places with the oily steel where I thought the components were similar. That's why you have different tones here. And the reason I did that again was I was looking to create kind of an antique effect to make it look like an older toy that had been sitting here for a while, or an older model that had been sitting here for a while. The highest highlights, all I did was to touch the edges and corners of things. I used a little bit of the Vallejo chrome just to get to give it that three-dimensional effect. I also used the chrome up here and underneath this head assembly where the antenna goes in to make that little bit of the spoked wheel there on top stick out a little bit more. The rubberized components here, again, I used the Vallejo Panzer Aces dark rubber along with the neck assembly. Aside from those now, then when we get into the colors of what I did here for his chest piece and the antenna and his claws, I used a bunch of different Citadel paints. I have a lot of old Citadel paints. I bought an entire set right before they changed their product line. So it came in a nice little case, along with paintbrushes and everything else. And now you can't get these paints, or you can get these paints or close to the equivalent of these paints, but you can't get these exact colors the way they were originally bottled. But anyway, so what I used for the claws was blood red. The yellow component is golden yellow. Again, we used foundation white or white skull white. The green color is their old scorpion green. The blue that I attempted to put down, in case you guys want to try it, it was Enchanted blue. And of course, I used gloss varnish to give it that aged effect on the colored components. Badab black was the black wash I used on his chest plate and a couple other deeper recesses. And then to get that blue tint on that clear plastic piece, I used Asurmen blue. Again, Daka does have a conversion chart on their page, so you can go there and look up the conversions if you really want to know what these are. But most of the places where you'll find game shops paints, you'll still find the conversion charts there for people who are looking for the colors of how they come out now. Now, aside from that, a lot of people have been asking me what I use for a primer, so I thought I'd go over this and exactly how I do it. I use Vallejo Surface Primer. There's your product number right there. I tend to use gray. I don't use black or white. I use gray. The reason why I do that is because I'm trying to get out of blacking and whiting out colors. I'm trying to highlight or darken a color with a darker shade of that color, or by using its color opposite, which I'm going to go over. I'm going to do a video on the color wheel and how to use it. I mean, I do at times gray out colors, but for the most part I'm trying to not go from black to white or from dark to light anymore. I'm trying to start out with the base color and then lighten and darken from there by basically blending my colors and glazing them in. But anyway, so I use a Vallejo primer, And what I'm doing is I'm thinning that with airbrush thinner. Now I use a 60% surface primer to 40% thinner. So basically that's 6 drops of this for 4 drops of this. And what I do is I put that right into my airbrush. I put the thinner in first, then I put in the surface primer, and then I mix it using a brush right inside the cup. So I do all that in here, I mix it all together, and then I start spraying. And the reason I do that is because you get dry tip on the airbrush. By putting the thinner in, I find I don't get a clogging or sticking or spraying issues. It seems to flow real smooth, real nice, and that really works good for me. And I've had a lot of success with it. So, and particularly I do miniatures, and miniatures are very small, and you don't want to lose detail. The one thing I do want to tell you though is if you do use the surface primer, you have to let it dry for 24 hours. This is acrylic polyurethane. It is not acrylic paint, so it needs time to cure. So even though it's dried at a touch and maybe 45 minutes to an hour, you really want to let it set overnight. You'll get a much better result with it that way. It is self-leveling, so you don't have to worry about, if you put too much in one area, how do I get it off? I shoot it at about 20 psi, and again, I'm using a Patriot 105. That's mine right there. This is my bad boy right there. I like this brush. This is my all-purpose airbrush. This kind of does everything. This does my priming. This does my painting. I do have a Renegade Chrome that I use for more fine detail work, and then I have a Masters airbrush that came with my compressor that I use for things like shooting clear on, or if I'm going to use an enamel paint, like creating a dust effect, or anything where I'm afraid it'll destroy the my better airbrush. I put it in the cheap airbrush anyway. So that's what I use for an airbrush. This is much better than rattle cans in the alley. I don't have my neighbors looking at me like I'm a weirdo because you got this 50-year-old guy out there with a rattle can spraying figures. I look like I'm tagging garages with graffiti. So apart from that, Instacure, you can pick this up at any model shop, Hobby Lobby, places like this carry it. But basically what it is it's basically a super glue, and it bonds in seconds. And then of course for everything else I use Tamiya Ultra Thin. I wish this stuff was around when I was a kid. This stuff is wonderful. The brush application is fantastic. I absolutely love this stuff. I encourage everybody to use it. Now apart from that, I thought I'd go over a couple other things. One is you got to have a pretty good sharp knife all the time in the shop. Now I recommend X-Acto. X-Acto's been around forever here in the U.S. You can find them everywhere. Walgreens has them. Most of your department stores have them. Your Walmart, your Kmart, your Target. Pretty much everybody carries the old number 11. All the office supply stores carry them. So it's real easy to find the replacement blades for. You're not going to have any difficulty with it. If a lot of guys, they go for surgical blades and you got to order them online and then you don't have them when you need them. I tend to go with, the products that I can find that are readily available that are close by. I've got 2 or 3 of these laying around. I try to keep one with a brand new blade in it all the time, but most helpful, very helpful to have one of those. Sanding sticks is another one. Now these sanding sticks that I have come from Revell Models, and what they do is they make it real simple on you. They come in a kit. It's a pack, and as the colors lighten, the finer the grit. So basically, the dark one, that's your heaviest grit. The white one, that's your finest grit. So if you're going to do, let's say I was going to, work a little bit on the sanding out the clear plastic parts, I'm using this one. And between that, you got a lighter gray, a pink. So, these are very handy also. These are good to have in your stash. You could pick these types of things up at your local hobby store or any one of the online shops. You also saw me drill out the neck piece. I thought I'd point that out as well real quick. We can go over that. Here in the neck assembly, what I had problems with was, if you see these components here, let me get something I can point with. If you see these components here, it's very small. The tab is even smaller. It's supposed to poke all the way through and into the head assembly. So this piece here is supposed to go to this piece here. The problem with that is they are so small that I didn't think it had any real strength, that I'm going to knock this thing over once and it's just going to break and separate. So rather than wasting time with all that, I just simply sanded down these little nibs. This piece right here, let me see if I can get something smaller to point with. This piece right here, I just whacked that off. And in here, I could just completely drill that out. So this became just a hollow tube. This, I kind of took that nib off, and then I just ran that paper clip straight through. Now to do that, what I did was, I've got this drill. And this drill came from Tester's Models, and it comes with different size bits, which are real nice, real handy to use. But basically, here you go. So you got a bunch of different bits in there. I don't know if you can see those. And they're all different sizes. And what you do is you just start with a small pilot hole. It's a hand twist. And you work your way up in size. So that's what I did. I just made sure I kept it real straight. Got it to go all the way through. Then I took a paper clip. I slid it through there just like you saw in the video. And snipped it off with a pair of snippers. Now, like sprue cutters, it's good to have a set of these small hand tools. I know Hobby Lobby carries them. Most places where they have jewelry kits. Harbor Freight carries these as well. They're real small. They usually come in 6 different types. They have cutters, pliers, metal cutters, wire cutters. Real handy to have in the toolbox. Real good to have around the shop. Again, as far as the brushes that I use, again, I have the mixing brush. You always want to have that one brush that you do nothing but mix paint with. Then we used our Psycho, which is the nose hair on the toothpick. And again, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that on camera for you. Trying to figure out a way where you could see that, where it doesn't get completely washed out. But it is a very, very, very small, fine, tiny point. Next to that, I used a Insane Detail from Army Painter. There you go. Let's see if I can get that in focus. And it's, again, a real fine point. This has got a little bit longer draw on it, though, so it holds a little bit more paint. And the larger size brush, of course, is our character brush. That's where we did most of our base coating with, and most of our steel work. And that's pretty much it. That wraps it up for our B9 robot model. He's going to live here on the desk. I'm going to put pictures up on Facebook. I'll put up some new shots up there on Instagram as well. If you guys were watching yesterday when I finished them, I did put the pictures up. And I'd like to say, to everybody who waited these 5 months to see the completion of this build, thank you all very much. I appreciate the support for the length of time. Obviously, the hard drive crashing, my moving, change in position at my job, my son coming to live with me kind of slowed things down, and a lot of you have been very supportive, and I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and watching. And please keep liking us, please keep sharing the site with your friends. Again, you can go over to the website as well. The link will be posted down below. We do different things on the website than what we do here on the YouTube channel, so we can go a little more in-depth in different subjects and products that we use. And as the articles come up, I'll be mentioning them once a month here, the articles that we put up on the site on our channel updates. But other than that, thanks for everybody for for your support and for your help. Keep on liking us. And with that, see you next time. Okay, bye.